My fellow Zambians, there is a breach in the land and a plague has broken out. Until we stop this plague in its track, Zambia could soon be turned into one big funeral house. The nation is gripped with fear. The anxiety of not knowing whose funeral shall be announced tomorrow is now upon us. The infection rates and associated deaths have reached extremely dangerous levels. To sit back and watch and hope for the best is not the best way to save lives. The current state of affairs demands for a change of lifestyle. It demands that government makes radical decisions which will result in slowing down the pandemic and eventually end it. Men and women of God, preachers of the gospel, have not been spared from this pandemic. And I'm glad to note that we are at a place where we have power to make a decision to stop this plague. Church ministry is a hazardous career in this COVID-19 season. While the medical staff are officially called frontline workers, pastors and priests who are in the forefront visiting, praying, and burying the victims are not considered so. Medical staff are provided with protective wear, while pastors are not. As the church, we must make tough choices and change our approach in how we handle, especially funeral services. It may offend some, but it shall save many, including ministers of the gospel, whom we shall need to continue ministering to us. COVID-19 is battering families and shattering hopes of many Zambian families. For many, there is only a deep sense of helplessness against this pandemic. But Zambia should not be without hope. We are a covenant nation. And I wish to remind Zambian people that while seasons have changed, God's faithfulness remains the same. Change is all around us. The United States has changed its government. COVID-19 has changed everything around us. The world is kept in fear and anxiety. Fear and hopelessness have covered the world community. The good news is that for those of us who know God, we understand that darkness does not last forever. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning, the Bible says. The sun shall rise again. I pray that when it does, you shall still be standing. Be not afraid. Fear only weakens both your faith and your immunity. Be strong. The storm will soon be over. We shall overcome this pandemic together as a nation. We call on government to lock down the epicenters of this pandemic. The current Ministry of Health guidelines are commendable, but generally Zambians are not heeding the government cause for several reasons. The cardinal ones being that government is seen to be in the forefront of disregarding these guidelines by holding political meetings without restraint. Secondly, government seems to have no capacity to enforce the Ministry of Health guidelines. This state of affairs therefore calls for immediate police-monitored lockdowns in all epicenters. This is the least that God expects from us, to protect ourselves from ourselves. We must put politics aside and fight this pandemic as a united nation. To do this together is to guarantee the ultimate defeat of this pandemic. I wish to assure all Zambians that we have it inside each one of us to stop this pandemic, and stopping it, we shall. May God's favor shine upon this land, and may He save our nation. I thank you.
Since the beginning of the COVID-19 third wave in Zambia, numbers have been surging at an all-time high. This has led to the strict enforcement of the COVID-19 preventive guidelines, including the suspension of political rallies. The Ministry of Health has been announcing alarming statistics on a daily basis. However, COVID-19 still remains a hoax to many Zambians. A number of people spoken to in the streets and compounds of Lusaka say COVID-19 is fake or that it is only targeting those of high status in society. The Teaching Hospital's COVID-19 wards and the Levi Mwanawasa University Teaching Hospital COVID-19 Intensive Care Unit to get a glimpse of how serious the situation is. The unit is currently at full capacity with 10 patients, while the rest are on the waiting list to enter the ICU. The entire isolation center has 113 patients, with 17 new admissions in the last 24 hours. Dr. Brighton Sokololo is the head of clinical care at Levi Mwanawasa University Teaching Hospital.
So our patients are quite sick. The patients are referred here from the different government institutions and the private institutions, and this mostly is due to the need for oxygen. For ICU, it's overstretched. At almost any time, it's full to capacity, and we have patients waiting to go to ICU. So that's how bad the situation is. Our patients are quite sick, and this third wave seems to be even worse than the first and second wave, because we are receiving very sick patients.
UTH head of clinical care, Dr. Mwila Lupasha, says the institution's oxygen supply has been stretched.
The virus, it is affecting mostly the respiratory system. So with little oxygen, the situation gets a bit complicated. So that is the issue with oxygen. With oxygen, the complications will go a little bit up.
With permission granted, 46-year-old Kainde Chulu spoke to the Movie TV news crew. Chulu has a word of caution to those who still believe that COVID-19 is not real.
The disease is there. It is there. You just have to get serious with it. Otherwise, it is there. Yeah. Everything was just okay for me, like in terms of treatment. It's perfectly well. Let's attend to that. I cannot complain.
In the last 24 hours, 16 patients have died from COVID-19. And if that doesn't send a shiver down the spine of many Zambians, then what will is still unknown.